So in 1930, he joins the NAACP. He's part of the Three Johnsons with his two sisters, Wendy and Bobby, and featured in the New Faces in 1936 there. 1938, he joins the Young Communist League of Harlem. Serves in the Buffalo Soldiers during World War II. Earns two Purple Hearts, and then leaves because of a leg injury. And then in 1956, leaves the Communist Party after Khrushchev's speech on the cult of personality, in which Khrushchev distances himself from Stalinist policies. But he continues his social activism throughout the rest of his life, and Mark can talk about that. So that's just sort of a quick overview. And then the Cotton Club itself, I just want to give a quick overview. In 1920, it opens as the Deluxe Club Deluxe, and it's owned by the first African-American heavyweight champions, Jack Johnson. But then it fails, and it gets reopened in 1923, where it's owned by the Irish gangster, Oni Mann. So quickly, that's sort of quickly a brief history. The other thing I want to point out is Stuart Johnson had a very different view upon him. So I want to contrast it with the view that we usually get. Right? So it's usually at the site, especially in this time period, this glamorous nightlife. That glamorous nightlife, as we'll hear him talking about, was all rested on these sort of minstrel stereotypes you see here, ideas about blacks, right, attached to primitivism. Minstrelsy, as you can see, some of the figures in the Cotton Club menu there are directly out of minstrel tradition. And then, of course, the hypersexualization of particularly the female body. And just to give sort of a sense of how pervasive that was, here's a quote from the Abel Green review from Variety in 1927, and he's reviewing the Cotton Club show. Quote, "The Cotton Club is the foremost black and tan cafe, featuring a whale of a colored review that matches any of the preceding editions, all of which have been noteworthy for their artistry and talent. As in the past, the undressed thing goes double. The almost Caucasian-hued high-yeller gals look swell and uncork the meanest kind of coochie ever exhibited to a conglomerate mixed audience." And he's talking about mixed gender, not mixed race. One coocher, boyish Bob Hayden, said to be especially imported from Chicago for her Annapolis proclivities, who does the Harlem River quiver like no self-respecting body of water. The teasinous torso tossing yet, and how. The show otherwise is a pretentious affair for a nightclub, colored or au fait. The big attraction, of course, are the great gals, 10 of them, the majority of whom in white company can pass for Caucasians. Possessed of the native jazz heritage, their hotsy-totsy performance of working sans raps could never be matched by a white gal. The brownskins' chivalry is worth a $2 cover alone. End quote. Right. So I just want to note how pervasive and dominant that sort of representation was at the time. So that's the view, even of the celebrities. Right? So Cap Calloway. On one hand, as I'll be pointing out, this contrast. On one hand, we see the men in coat and tails and this sort of formal wear, but the music is described as jungle music. And on the other hand, the star dancers, such as Baby Ida Cox here, is not only sort of sexualized, but animalized, and it's sort of made look like a bird, and various other costumes, as you can see. But the view from the dance floor is a little bit different, and here we're going to hear a little bit of Howard Stern Johnson talking himself about the social inequities connected to the Cotton Club.
It was designed like a plantation. It was an all-black show, all black waiters, but all white guests. And they really wanted to be slave masters. They were there to be entertained by us hip-wriggling blacks with all of our exotic and sensual capacities laid bare for them. I couldn't swallow that. I said, what's in this country that we are scuffling and buck dancing for $35 a week? And people can come from downtown in tuxedos and evening clothes, white tie and stiff collar and diamonds and everything, and spend $1,000 for a night's entertainment. So I saw in life itself what class distinctions meant. And the more communists I met, the more I liked what they had to say and what they were doing. Because I saw that of all the people who were talking about solving problems and programs and so forth, when there was a picket line, they were out front.
So these are more pictures of the Cotton Club in his collection. And I'm going to be quoting here from his unpublished memoirs. The first time I heard of the Cotton Club was in 1928 when the Duke Ellington Orchestra broadcast on a nationwide evening hookup on WABC, the CBS affiliate. We couldn't wait to hear the strains of East St. Louis Tolo, the Ellington theme song of the time. So I'm just going to play you an intro from one of those broadcasts. And note, on one hand, of course, there's going to be a sort of praise of Duke Ellington as a composer, and yet this sort of nickname that comes at the end.
Hello everybody, welcome to our famous Cotton Club. Sitting spare a minute, your merry making, I'd like to have the pleasure of introducing the greatest living master of jungle music, the restoring harmony hound, none other than Duke Ellington. Can you hear out of
So again, this sort of contrast, right, going on. And again from his memoirs. We didn't know at the time that the splendid sound of the Ellington organization was not jungle music. At the age of 13, I didn't know jungle music from jukebox or jazz. I later felt Ellington's sound was a creative form of irony, which masked the commercial pandering to the upper-class white audience, thrilled at the opportunity to witness and hear what it thought was genuine black exotica. So again, I'm talking now about his view of what the Cotton Club represented for him and the black community at the time.
This was in the middle of the Depression. 1932, 33, and 34. 70% of the black males in Holland were unemployed. In order for the family to survive, both my sister and I had to work, and the best work we could find was dancing at the Cotton Club in Holland.
And again, I'm going to be quoting from his article, Evolution of Nonviolent Philosophy. Quote, my sister Winnie was hired to dance at the Cotton Club, a famous Harlem show place. It was the middle of the Depression. My father was a porter at the Embassy Theater with a low salary, so the family moved to New York to be near the Cotton Club. The Cotton Club was controlled by gangsters. When I escorted my sister Winnie to the club sometimes, I got the opportunity to hear tales of how they used violence to maintain their power in New York City. Sometimes I saw it put into action with recalcitrant customers or employees. I happened to be at the club the night Lena Horne's father objected to an incident involving one of the gangsters and Lena, and she's the one with the red circle there. He was beaten up severely, thrown out, and never showed up again. We hated this kind of violence, but there was nothing we could do about it. Still, the Cotton Club offered the best wages available for us in the Depression. 75% of black males could not find employment. City marshals were putting people's furniture out on the street for non-payment of rent. And men and women set up shacks along the New York City Central Railroad tracks alongside the Hudson River when they could not afford housing. These conditions were more threatening to us than the gangsters who controlled the Cotton Club, so we chose to accept the work at the Cotton Club rather than face life on the streets. In fact, we were happy to get work at the club. I became one of the first chorus boys in the 1934 show, Bill Wynn, and my father became a waiter, so we had 3 salaries coming in at a time when poverty was a lot for most of our friends. It became apparent that these gangsters had the approval of the top layers of American society. They sat down and wined and dined with governors, mayors, and the cream of the social register. I saw Barbara Hutton, Sophie Tucker, Al Jolson, Harry Richmond, Paul Whiteman, Jimmy and Woolworth, Donahue, the 5 and Dime store heirs, and many other celebrities. One did not even think about whether one wanted to work in such conditions. We thought it was glamorous to work at the club, on the other hand. In fact, when we finished our show at the club, We went out for our own entertainment and were treated like celebrities ourselves in the black-owned clubs that we patronized in Harlem, simply because we worked at the Cotton Club. And these are really interesting pictures from the archive because they show sort of behind the screen, right, so the labor involved. So these are rehearsal pictures of some of the dancers. And again, I'm quoting from his Evolution of the Nonviolent Philosophy. But if New Orleans was the cradle of jazz, Harlem's where it grew up. Harlem in the 30s was a preview of much that was characteristic of the counterculture that grew out of the radical upsurge of the 60s. Demonstrations against unemployment, racism, and poverty were a daily affair. And so you note on the sign on the left there, it says, "The new Negro has no fear." Right? So there's this change, right, in the sort of political consciousness of the community. And another condition at the time that politicized him was lynching in the 1930s. And he writes, "During this period, the newspapers carried stories of lynchings at least once a week. From 1920 to 1935, there was an average of 300 to 400 lynchings per year, a savagery unchallenged by any responsible national agency. The anxiety level in the black community during those years was very high. We felt most uncomfortable going into white neighborhoods. Many domestic workers were picked up and delivered to and from work by their employers." And you can see here where the NAACP and the Fifth Avenue officers used to fly that flag when they would get news of lynching. And then just to sort of note again the pervasiveness of this activity, one, there were postcards made of lynchings. And this one in particular struck me to read. One, it's written to Reverend John Holmes of the Unitarian Church here in New York. "This is the way we do them down here. The last lynching has not been put on card yet. We'll put you on our regular mailing list. Expect one a month on the average." So it's a chilling frequency, and this politicizes Stretch Johnson. And again, I'm going to quote from his unpublished memoirs here. "In 1935, however, conditions in Harlem became so bad that any incident could have been a spark for a social explosion in the community. This is exactly what happened on March 19, 1935. A boy was beaten by a policeman after being accused of shoplifting in Woolworths on 135th Street. The word soon spread that the boy had been killed. Within minutes, swarms of people descended on 125th Street to see what happened. The police attempted to control the crowds, pushing and shoving developed, and within an hour, groups of young men started smashing windows, police started clubbing, crowds fought back, the police were overwhelmed, and looting of stores began. Soon, the riot had spread from 116th Street up to 145th Street, from 5th to 8th Avenue. The downtown press called it a race riot. Fiorello LaGuardia, the mayor of New York at the time and a progressive, went along with that viewpoint and called on whites to stay out of Harlem. This ended what had been a thriving tourist industry for the nightclubs of Harlem. That's an interesting choice of words. The Cotton Club shut down its uptown operation at 142nd and Lenox in the summer of 1936. It reopened at 48th and Broadway in 1937. However, whites who knew Harlem and wanted to keep up with the pace-setting trends in jazz, dance, and entertainment continued to come to Harlem in spite of the mayor's uninformed mandate. For me, the Harlem riot was misnamed. It was neither an anti-white riot nor a race riot, as the establishment press shouted. It was a massive protest against super-exploitation, high prices, unemployment, low wages when there was work, high rents, segregation, and job discrimination. It simply happened that the landlords who established the rents, the shopkeepers who set the prices, the employers who determined who would work, and the realtors who determined what neighborhoods people would live in were white. The events in Harlem were part of a national protest, demonstration, marches, sit-downs, strikes, mass rallies, and picketing that led to the entire gamut of social reform called the New Deal. I saw that what could be called violence was primarily the intervention of the police force. They had the arms and the clubs. They did the shooting. The events in Harlem also caused my way of thinking to go in a more radical direction. I saw the Communist Party of Harlem active in the streets, organizing demonstrations, initiating coalitions, and other movements on behalf of the community's welfare. I joined the Communist Party in January 1938. And he goes on to talk about Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in baseball a decade later. So on one hand, we have this view, right, of Harlem at that time period. There's nightclubs, entertainment, the reefer man up there. Yet, on the other hand, Harlem had the most churches per capita of any of the 5 boroughs. And here's a picture of 1930 of the Abyssinian Church, which is still here, with 10,000 members at the time. So a very different picture of Harlem as a prospering So I'd like to end with Johnson and his marriage to his first wife, Marcia Sherman, here. And it's a book, from the souvenir book from the Small's Paradise, which was another nightclub at the time. And his decision to marry a white woman and fellow communist, Martha Sherman, was challenged, not least by other party members. And he dismissed their objections, writing, quote, "I was not going to decide who I would marry on the basis of prejudices which reflected the past, which we were dedicated to overthrowing." And so you can see on the back, there's written at the top right hand there is, "To my darling, you look so happy and I know why. Love you, Marcia." And right below that, "To my sweetheart, yes. That's why, that's the reason I love it." Stretch. And so I'd like to sort of end with the idea that Harlem is also a home and not simply sort of tourist nightclub. Thank you.